climate change is the most pressing issue we face as a species in our world today.
Is that the atmosphere is getting warmer because the CO2 in the atmosphere is increasing, and it's increasing at something like 3 to 4 parts per million per year.
I think that climate change is the challenge of our generation.
Do we wait for these negative changes to happen, or do we do something proactive about it?
We are so knowledgeable and we have the technology at our fingertips to move away from fossil fuels. It's just that we need to do it.
And so the divestiture notion is to try and get people's attention, I think, to say, look, this is a pretty big problem and we need to really be addressing it.
The point is not to take money away from the corporations. The point is to change the conversation about climate change and to make clear that the status quo actually can't continue.
One broader goal of divestment is to put pressure on the fossil fuel industry itself and tell them that, they, ExxonMobil, Shell, these companies should be investing more of their money in trying to pursue renewables themselves.
It's about bringing attention to an issue, changing people's hearts and minds, and from there, from a larger group, then we start to see these more direct economic impacts on these companies.
When we say we're a sustainable campus, what does that actually mean?
You have to try to split up the way you're trying to think about divestment. From the Board of Trustees perspective and the endowment committee, right, the people that actually, because they have a fiduciary responsibility to the college to make sure that our endowment is earning the highest possible return it can earn, while at the same time mitigating as much risk as they possibly can. So from their perspective, they have to look at it in almost an environmentally benign way. From that perspective, from the fiduciary perspective of the board, and in terms of managing the endowment.
Dickinson doesn't have a huge endowment, so having a high return becomes quite important.
The fossil fuels may only be 2 or 3% or 5% or 10% of our total investment, but this is significant because they tend to provide security when other types of investments may not be doing well.
We have an investment manager, investor, that if we told them would take that money and invest it in something else. Would we get as big a return? I don't know. But they could probably do it. They could probably find other things to invest in that would pay the money that we still need for financial aid and all the other things that we use that endowment money for.
If you have confidence in science, you know that energy stocks at some point in the future are going to be worthless, because we're going to have to definitely stop this addiction to carbon.
This is a very volatile sort of return, that any sort of price on carbon that accounts for the true cost of it, if that were to ever occur, then these stocks, these returns that we were getting, are going to plummet. They're just not going to be there anymore. So if nothing else, divestment is actually a smart and savvy economic move for our institution to make.
It sort of becomes a kind of one side is moral and the other side is practical narrative, right? And I can understand how that happens, right? On the one side we have people saying, these profits are very important and we need them, and there's some truth to that. And then on the other side we have people saying this is wrong. I think it's important to see that there's actually serious practical considerations on both sides, that sustainability isn't just, I don't want to say just a moral issue, it is perhaps the most practical of issues.
However, there's a different story when it comes to the type of reputation and the type of precedent that Dickinson College and the Dickinson community wants to set. I think it's from the board's perspective, they have to separate those two. But I think in terms of the overall decision making, in terms of whether or not the college should divest, we have to then ultimately combine those two stories together.
Well, some are saying like, no, don't divest because we are, our endowment's so little and we need to get every, thing out of it that we can. I feel like as we're trying to be bold and creative in dealing with how we're going to move forward economically, in the next few years. I just feel like divestment's one of those opportunities that we should be taking rather than ignoring.
I know he considers schools that like ours that are strong on sustainability and have a high ranking in sustainability to be somewhat hypocritical when it comes to actually, I said walking the walk, but putting our money where our hearts are, which is in this case would be divestment.
As long as we're not, wrecking the endowment, and we might even be willing to trade off a little bit in terms of investment if that means we're investing in things we believe in.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to create dialogue between college administrators, college employees, and college students, especially here at Dickinson, because there's obviously an interest for that now, and just to develop a process for transparency in terms of how funds are invested or not, and developing a baseline of comfort in terms of what, as a community, a campus community, we value in terms of how we invest our money or use our money and resources.
I would say in terms of divestiture, let's take a look and see what some of these large mutual funds are that do have allow for social divestiture and through socially appropriate investment. And let the investment advisors to the college speak to the students, speak to the community, why we don't have more of our funds in socially equitable accounts.
The signal that Dickinson is sending through divestment might be worth getting a slightly lower rate of return on the endowment.
In some cases, it would help the bottom line in terms of admissions, but it might be detrimental in terms of endowment.
If we wanted to divest and so made the move away from investure, I think that would be, as I say, a risky strategy because it would raise the need to get more full-paying students. So would maybe potentially limit the scholarships that we could give to students.
I'm aware of the risks that it involves, but I feel that the benefits of doing it, obviously for our climate, and possibly for our reputation and for the kinds of students we would continue to attract to come to school here, and the kind of place that we're trying to foster, I think that an initiative like that would have benefits that I think people aren't really taking in seriously.
If we want to be leaders, we have to be early.
Divestment can be a very valid tool in sending a signal to the rest of the academic community, both nationally and internationally, that Dickinson is very serious about sustainability, about maintaining human welfare into the future in what's likely to be a heavily carbon-constrained future. And if we want to be serious about staying within our carbon budgets, then divestment could send a very effective signal in that way.
Well, I sort of agree that it's not going to change the use of fossil fuels. That's something that the world is addicted to. I think we can begin to make a statement by divesting. I don't think if we start to do this gradually and look for companies that are involved in alternatives, that it will hurt our portfolio at all.
We can't, as the college, take a naive position and say it's very easy just to do this and we should do it because it's the right thing to do.
And I don't want to underestimate how difficult the practical barriers are and how important the endowment is to the college. So we have to find a way to do it that makes sense to the college and that doesn't really impact the college, or that impacts it just enough that we're willing to accept that as the price of making a strong statement.
But we've got to start doing something. We've got to start moving away from, let's say, the fossil fuels that are the most potent.
So instead of engaging with fossil fuel companies, we should be engaging with renewable energy companies in order to shift that balance of where resources are going into what technologies, into what industries. We can't expect renewable energies to just magically take over overnight. We need to be mindful and intentional about where our funds are going.
I think we want to remember that no one's talking about throwing the money away. People are talking about reinvesting the money in other kinds of presumably also profitable endeavors. So it's not a subtraction of the money, it's a kind of movement of the money from one kind of investment to another.
There are lots of mutual funds, and in fact, the teacher's pension has an opportunity where you can invest your money in a socially responsible fund. Right? Well, this is kind of the same thing. Why can't you just invest your money in a socially responsible fund instead of in an energy fund?
I'm of the mindset that investing close to home, in terms of close to home to Dickinson, would be a really exciting path to chart.
The money we get back from these energy efficiency improvements, whether that's retrofitting the buildings to be LEED certified, right? There is an ROI there, right? There's some return on investment that can be reaped, and that can be then reinvested in a revolving green fund. It can provide a way for the college to have basically a savings account for green investments in the future.
There seems to be this implicit that we need to divest to have the funds that we currently have in fossil fuel companies to reinvest in the community. But I think in some ways the green revolving fund idea is much more actually we use even if we don't divest, we use the higher returns we're currently getting to find ways to commit certain portion of the funds, and maybe it's all the returns that effectively come from fossil fuel into projects.
Coming up with creative solutions as a group of, trustees, administrators, faculty, students, and I think that's where you get buy-in, that's where you get support, and that's where you kind of sustain the longevity of an institution.
Students should absolutely have a voice in this stuff.
Students should definitely have a role, with the understanding that at the end of the day, students leave after 4 years. And we want to leave in terms of sustainability for the institution as well. We need to make sure that the endowment is spent in a way that's good for students further into the future.
But I think one of the best things about the divestment movement is encouraging students or making students have these conversations and start to investigate these issues.
I think it's going to be hard, and I think it's a long game. I mean, we start talking about it now, and I think it'll take years for it to really happen.
A lot of people would say that individuals can't do a whole lot, but there's a lot of individuals, and if lots of individuals do things, then it'll make a difference.
I think that we can do all that we can in our own power, and everything counts.
Here's how we continue to push that envelope forward and do our part.
I think it's really important, and I think the college should keep moving towards it as much as they can. I know that it's not easy for the college, and I think that there are real practical difficulties, but I've been encouraged by how much the college has moved, and I think that motion could continue.
Personally, I would be on the front lines. I would get arrested. I think this is it, It's like this is the issue.